And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Sunni militants have seized part of Iraq's largest oil refinery, located in the northern Iraqi city of Baiji. The militants reportedly now control 3/4 of the refinery complex. Meanwhile, Shiite families are leaving the city of Baquba in droves out of fear the militants from ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, will soon seize the city. Baquba is located just 40 miles from Baghdad. Many analysts say the fighting in Iraq has become a proxy war between the Sunni-led Saudi Arabia and Shiite-led Iran. On Tuesday, Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani, vowed in live television to protect Shiite shrines in Iraq. Rouhani said many Iranians have already signed up to go to Iraq to fight. This came as Iraq's Shiite-led cabinet accused Saudi Arabia of promoting genocide in Iraq by backing Sunni militants. In Washington, President Obama is scheduled to meet today with the 4 top congressional leaders. There are conflicting reports of his plan of action. The Wall Street Journal reports Obama has decided against immediate airstrikes in Iraq, but the New York Times reports Obama is considering what the paper described as a targeted, highly selective campaign of airstrikes. One official told the Times the campaign would most likely use drones and could last for a prolonged period. Joining us to discuss the situation in Iraq and across the wider region is Lakhdar Brahimi, who resigned his post last month as the United Nations Arab League Special Envoy for Syria. Brahimi has been deeply involved in Middle Eastern diplomacy for decades. He's a former Algerian freedom fighter who went on to become Algeria's foreign minister. As a diplomat, he's worked on many of the world's biggest conflicts, from Afghanistan and Iraq, from Haiti to South Africa. He's a member of the Elders, a group of retired statesmen formed in July 2007 at the initiative of Nelson Mandela, who was originally chaired by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, now by Kofi Annan. Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I interviewed Lakhdar Brahimi on Tuesday. He's in Paris, France. I started by asking him to respond to what's happening in Iraq right now.
Islamic State of Iraq and Sham have invaded and taken control of the second largest city in Iraq, which is absolutely extraordinary. That is the city of Mosul. I understand that they went down also and took for part, or maybe they are still there, of the city of Tikrit, the birthplace of Saddam Hussein, and that they were marching on Baghdad, and they have been stopped somewhere. And I doubt very much that they will enter Baghdad in any significant manner. But this indicates the fragility of the state of Iraq that has been created by the Americans after they invaded the country in 2003. It's really extraordinary that the state as important and as rich, as a matter of fact, as Iraq, cannot protect the second largest city in the country. It also vindicates what the Secretary General of the United Nations and myself have been saying for months, years even. And that is that the situation in Syria is like an infected wound. If it is not treated properly, it will spread. And this is what is happening. The Secretary General has very often warned that if Syria is not attended to properly, then most, if not all, of its neighbors were in danger. And this is one of the neighbors of Syria. Of course, it has its own problems. And these latest developments is an addendum, something that has come on top of the problems that were there. Those problems were that the country was more and more divided along sectarian lines, and the corruption was rife, and the government was not capable, has not been capable of re-establishing services like water, electricity, sewages, and so on, at the level they existed under Saddam when the country was under extremely severe sanctions. So this is where we are. Syria there is fighting there, there is killing, there is bombardments are taking place, and people are, there is no development taking place, and people are leaving their homes, their villages, their cities, either remaining inside the country as internally displaced people or going to neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey in particular. And quite a few of them have gone to Iraq, actually.
Ambassador Brahimi, you mentioned the complicity of the United States invasion of 2003 in the present situation in Iraq. I want to turn to comments made by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair over the weekend. He said, in fact, the 2003 invasion of Iraq was not responsible for the violent insurgency now engulfing the country. He was speaking on the BBC's Andrew Marr show. Let's just go to a clip.
So my point is very simple. Even if you left Saddam in place in 2003, then when 2011 happened and you had the Arab revolutions going through Tunisia and Libya and Yemen and Bahrain and Egypt and Syria, you would have still had a major problem in Iraq. Indeed, you can see what happens when you leave the dictator in place, as has happened with Assad now. But if you say to me, would I prefer a situation where we left Saddam in place in 2003? Do I think the region would be safer, more stable if we'd done that? My answer to that is unhesitatingly no.
Ambassador Brahimi, that was former British Prime Minister Tony Blair speaking over the weekend. Could you respond to the comments he made about the 2003 invasion?
The situation in Iraq was extremely bad, and definitely it was called the Republic of Fear with reason. You cannot justify post facto an invasion that was absolutely horrible. I mean, first of all, it was unjustified. Second, it was built on a lie. The weapons of mass destructions were just in the imagination of some people who wanted to invade Iraq. Justifications were invented after democracy, getting rid of a dictator, and I don't know what. That very dictator, when he was just as a dictator as he was in 2003, was a very good friend of the United States and of Britain when he was fighting Iran in the 80s. But let's forget about that for the moment. So the invasion was absolutely horrible, and this, it has. Let's talk about what is important to talk about now: terrorism. There was no terrorism. There were no terrorists in Iraq in those days. Terrorism was sucked in, brought in by, as a direct consequence of the invasion. And it flourished, first of all, in Iraq, and then it went to Syria, and now it is back in Iraq. So to say that 2003 had nothing to do with what is happening now is a little bit, and I don't know, overstatement, understatement, certainly not the reality.
Ambassador Brahimi, Paul Bremer, the first head of the so-called Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq, one of the first things he did in that role was to sign the Coalition Provisional Authority Orders 1 and 2, completely dismantling Iraq's government and military. During your tenure as UN Special Envoy for Iraq, you referred to Bremer as, quote, the dictator of Iraq. Writing in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend, weekend, in the wake of the present violence that's engulfing Iraq, Bremer said, quote, "It's time for both American political parties to cease their ritualistic incantations of no boots on the ground, which is not the same as no combat forces. Of course Americans are reluctant to re-engage in Iraq, yet it's President Obama's unhappy duty to educate them about the risks to our interests posed by the unfolding drama in Iraq." Can you elaborate, Ambassador Brahimi, on your comments about Paul Bremer being dictator of Iraq and what that meant for Iraq?
I was just repeating something that he said himself. I think he said, and he has written, I think, in his memoirs, that nobody in the history of Iraq had as much power as he had. For my money, that is equivalent to being a dictator. And he was doing everything he wanted. And you have mentioned, the dissolution of the army. Every American who knew anything about Iraq, and there were quite a few, many of them in government, former ambassadors, people who know Arabic, who know the country, who know the region, they were all unanimous. Don't touch the army. There are definitely 10, 15, 100, 1,000 officers that have blood on their hands, that are corrupt, that should be taken off the army, but keep the army. This is the backbone of the country, and it is going to cooperate with you. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people, including in the military, were already talking to some of the Iraqi militaries to see how they can come back and reorganize themselves and work with the occupying power. But Mr. Bremer, and he was saying that he was under instructions from the Secretary of State for Defense, Mr. Rumsfeld, said, no, we will dissolve the army, and they went ahead and did it. I think that, I don't think there is any argument that that was a mistake then. What should the Americans do today? I fully understand the hesitation of President Obama to send foreign troops in, American troops into Iraq again. As a principle, foreign troops meddling in an internal situation like this is not a very good idea. I also hear that there is a possibility that they will be talking to Iran, and I'm sure that they will be talking to other neighbors of Iraq, chief of them, amongst them Saudi Arabia, to see what needs to be done to help Iraq solve its problems and perhaps stop these terrorist organizations from making more progress. But be careful that this help from outside does not make things worse. I think that it's, there is a lot of sectarianism in Iraq. I don't think there is a secret that's a secret, or anybody ignores that fact or says it doesn't exist. So please, if you help face this ISIS, that's great. But make sure that you don't make things worse by making, by supporting more sectarianism, not less sectarianism.
Ambassador Brahimi, on the question of sectarianism, there have been several reports that suggest that in the initial days of the Iraq invasion in 2003, there were some neoconservative members of the Bush administration that actively fostered sectarianism between Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds as a policy of kind of divide and rule. Could you comment on that?
I have told my American friends, several times. Of course, I am not privy to what was taking place in the Pentagon, where responsibility lied for Iraq. President Bush had given full, total responsibility to the Pentagon over Iraq. What was discussed there and what they did there, I don't know. But as somebody from the region, just looking at what was actually taking place, it was extremely hard not to believe that sectarianism was being promoted, and that the people that were being put in charge were, I mean, of course, the Kurdish region was given to the Kurds, 100%, and the rest of the Iraqis had no part in it. But in the rest of Iraq, the impression one had was that the people that were preferred by the occupying powers were the most sectarian Shia and the most pro-Iranian Shia. So, that Iraq is now very, very close to Iran. Again, from the point of view of somebody who looks at things from outside, I have absolutely no knowledge of what went on in the high spheres of power in Washington. The impression we had is that these people were put in charge either out of total ignorance, and that is extremely difficult to accept, or intentionally. But the fact is, the system that was established was very sectarian.
Ambassador Lakhdar Brahimi, he resigned his post last month as United Nations Arab League Special Envoy for Syria. We'll be back with him in a moment.